You're watching MHS. Sit back, sub, and enjoy scary stories. My name is Bill. In May 2020, I worked the graveyard shift at a convenience store in a rough neighborhood in Oregon. During the day, the area looked normal enough, but after midnight, things got chaotic. Street gangs and groups of rowdy kids usually hung out around there at night. Fights, shoplifting, and even run-ins involving knives or guns were just part of the daily routine. The biggest problem wasn't even the criminals. It was my boss. He was incredibly cowardly and terrified of legal trouble. The store had one unbreakable rule: never call the police. He believed that the cops showing up only led to investigations, bad press, and headaches that would ruin the store's reputation. Because of this, we just had to take the abuse from the local punks. Once, a group came in at midnight, made a huge scene, and suddenly dumped a cup of hot coffee over my head. I had to stay calm and just take it so things wouldn't escalate. My coworker on that shift was Daniel, a shy college student. Daniel had it even worse than me. One time, a group of guys bullied him right inside the store. They forced him to take off his pants and kneel down to apologize, just for their own sick entertainment. Right at his most humiliating moment, Ryan walked in. Ryan was a tall, fit man, and as soon as the punks saw him in his police uniform, they backed off immediately. Ryan stepped in and cleared them out. Thanks to him, Daniel escaped that horrible situation. From that day on, Ryan became a hero in Daniel's eyes. Ryan patrolled the neighborhood often and would stop by our store to talk for a long time. He told us he was following in the footsteps of his late father, who had been a brave cop. Ryan confessed that he had failed the police entrance exam many times, but his hunger for justice kept him going. After years of trying, he said he finally earned his uniform. His story of perseverance inspired me, a dead-end night shift worker, and I truly admired him. Life went on like that until the night I went out to take out the trash. While I was gathering bags behind the store, I found something heavy tucked between the black trash bags. It was a handgun that looked exactly like a revolver. It was cold and heavy. I couldn't tell if it was a real gun or a high-quality model gun. I hesitated, but curiosity won out, and I decided to keep it to get a better look. I brought it inside and showed Daniel. He was curious too. After looking it over, he said it was best to hide it for safety. Daniel took the gun to the back break room and put it in a desk drawer. I stood behind the counter, but I couldn't stop thinking about that gun. I decided to go into the break room and check the security footage to see who had dumped it. I was stunned. On the screen, the person nervously tossing the gun into the trash with a panicked look on his face was none other than Ryan, our store's hero. The footage showed him in a heated scuffle with a group of thugs. Ryan had the gun in his hand, but the strange thing was that the thugs weren't afraid at all. They outnumbered him and easily overpowered him. While cornered, Ryan threw the gun into the trash and ran away, only to be dragged off screen by a guy in a black hoodie. I was completely confused. I went straight back to the drawer where Daniel had put the gun. It was gone. I asked Daniel about it, but he insisted he didn't take it and had no idea where it went. The whole thing remained a mystery to me for several days. A few days later, a group of young guys stormed into the store. They started searching everywhere and arguing loudly outside the door, saying they were looking for something someone hid. When I stepped out to tell them to quiet down, one of the guys, who had a murderous look in his eyes, suddenly smashed a metal ashtray into the back of my head. Pain exploded, and I felt warm blood running down my face. All the patience and anger I had bottled up for years finally snapped. I lost control. Ignoring my injury, I fought back like a madman. My sudden aggression terrified the group. They backed off, and the real police arrived a moment later because Daniel had called them. They were arrested for disturbing the peace and assault. I was taken to the hospital with a minor skull fracture. While I was in the hospital, I asked the officer in charge about Ryan. The officer looked surprised. He told me there was no cop named Ryan working in that entire district. That was when the truth finally came out. Ryan wasn't a cop. It was true that he had failed the exam many times. He was just a regular civilian, but his obsession with wearing the uniform was so strong that he bought a fake police outfit online to cosplay and patrol the streets, trying to dish out his own brand of justice. Those street punks, who were in and out of jail all the time, had realized Ryan was a fake long ago. They knew he only carried a realistic model gun, and they wanted to steal it to use in a real crime. Cornered, Ryan had tossed the gun into our trash so it wouldn't fall into their hands. Throughout my hospital stay, Ryan's story haunted me. He had lied, but it was a lie that was hard to hate. After I was discharged, I went back to the store, but my cowardly boss fired me immediately. He said I caused too much trouble and hurt the store's reputation. Before leaving, I went to the break room to return my uniform. I opened Daniel's locker, intending to leave my favorite hat as a secret gift for him, and I found the model gun hidden inside. I froze, and then I understood everything. Daniel must have watched the camera footage before I did. He realized Ryan was a fake cop. But because he wanted to protect the dignity of the hero who had saved him from humiliation, he secretly took the gun and lied to me. Daniel wanted to keep the image of his hero alive. Understanding Daniel's heart, I pretended I didn't see a thing and closed the locker. A few days later, a report popped up on the local news. A security guard named Ryan had been brutally beaten by a group of young men during the night and was in critical condition. Those men were the same thugs who had caused trouble at our store. I went cold after hearing the news. The man who put on a fake uniform just to follow his dream of protecting others ended up meeting a truly cruel fate.
My name is Danny. The memory I'm about to share has haunted me for 7 years, from the time I was 15 until now. Everything started around 2019 in the quiet suburban neighborhood where my family lived. Right across the street from us was an old house where a mother and son lived. They always kept their curtains tightly closed. The mother was in her 70s, but still very sharp, while her son was a total burden, both physically and mentally. I can't remember his real name, so in my mind, my friends and I just called him Creeper Joe. Joe was in his 30s. He was a big, strong guy, but he chose to live off his elderly mother. His appearance made you think of a villain in a horror movie. He was obese, pale, had messy hair, and always smelled bad. Joe didn't have a job or any friends. It seemed like his entire world existed within the four walls of his bedroom. Sometimes I'd run into him when I went out to get the mail. He would try to start conversations with me about metal music, probably because he heard it playing from my bedroom window. At the time, I just thought he was a lonely, weird guy, but harmless. I stayed polite and talked back until my dad stepped in. My dad usually hung out in the garage fixing cars or having a beer. One afternoon he called me over, his face stern and full of warning. "Stay away from that Joe guy, Danny. I've seen him standing behind his curtains watching the neighborhood kids, especially little Isaac across the street." My dad's words sent a chill down my spine. Thinking about a guy like Joe watching 13 or 14-year-old kids felt incredibly dirty. A few months later, my dad walked into the house looking extremely disturbed. He told us that Joe had just casually and shamelessly admitted to him that he liked young boys. I can't even describe how shocked my family was. My dad immediately called the police. They showed up minutes later and spent a long time inside Joe's house. I watched as the officers hauled out his desktop computer and a bunch of other electronics. The results of the investigation rocked the whole neighborhood. His computer was filled with illegal content and hundreds of secret photos of local boys, including me. Joe disappeared after that. I wasn't sure if he was on probation or in jail for a while, but for months, his mailbox overflowed because no one bothered to check it. When Joe finally showed up again, his attitude had completely changed. He didn't try to talk to me anymore. Instead, he avoided me. He would hide behind his door and wait for me to finish getting the mail before he stepped outside. I didn't care. I just acted like that disgusting neighbor didn't exist. However, the breaking point of the story happened about a month after he returned. Late one night, the sound of sirens tore through the silence of the neighborhood. An ambulance pulled up right in front of Joe's house. At first, I thought his mother was having a health emergency, but the truth was much worse. Creeper Joe was dead. The craziest thing I heard from the paramedics and the police on the scene was that his mother only found out he was dead after 3 days. Joe spent so much time locked in his room that she never suspected a thing. I can't even imagine how foul the scene inside that room must have been. But after Joe's death, some very strange details started to come out. The neighbors started whispering that shortly before he died, the mother had secretly taken out a massive life insurance policy on Joe. This made no sense because Joe was unemployed, had no income, no assets, and wasn't providing for her at all. In fact, the 70-year-old mother was the one supporting and serving him. After the insurance money paid out, she became very wealthy. She renovated her entire house and lived a very comfortable life from then on. Although the autopsy report said Joe died of a sudden heart attack, which made sense given his lazy lifestyle and terrible diet, my family and the neighbors still have a huge lingering question. Was it really just a coincidence that a predatory son died right after the insurance policy was signed? Or did a mother, out of desperation and exhaustion, find a way to clean up her burden while securing a rich retirement for herself? The truth probably went into the grave with Joe, but that creepy feeling every time I look at that house across the street is still there.
I have a boundless passion for horror stories and spend time writing them every day, but no story has chilled me as much as the one my close friend Oliver told me. Oliver told me about Hannah, a classmate he had in middle school. At that time, Oliver's mother and Hannah's mother signed them up for a winter extracurricular program, an activity that lasted several days during the December break. The program took place at a campsite in the northern mountains of Colorado, where snow covered the ground and the temperature was always freezing cold. During the program, students were instructed on outdoor living, building fires, cooking, snowshoeing, and participating in evening bonfires. Oliver recalled that near the outdoor kitchen area was a dry creek with crystal clear water where he and his friends would gather and play during their free time. Suddenly, an old, worn photograph floated down the cold water from the upstream direction. Oliver saw it first and pointed it out to everyone, but Hannah was the one who bent down and picked it up. When the group gathered to look at the photo, they saw a close-up portrait of a middle-aged woman. Her face was pale, and her hair was long and tangled. Her eyes were deep, dark, and red, as if she had cried too much. She was wearing a long white dress, and her entire body was soaking wet. The most terrifying thing was that she was holding a piece of paper near her chest, on which were a few lines of handwriting. The ink was blurred. The whole group looked at the words, and immediately the atmosphere froze, more so than the winter cold. Whoever finds this photo will hang themselves and end it all. Hannah let out a shrill scream, her face pale, throwing the photo far away in fear. The photo fell back into the water and floated downstream, disappearing. Oliver felt a chill spread through his body. He looked over at Hannah. Her eyes were red, her lips pale, and her whole body was trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would be like that," Oliver whispered, his voice shaking. After the incident, everyone became quiet. Hannah barely spoke anymore. The bonfire night, which they had looked forward to, became dull and tense. Oliver sat watching the fire, but his mind was filled only with the image of the woman's face in the photo and that terrifying message. For the next few weeks, the whole group felt an uneasy premonition about that photo. Oliver suffered many sleepless nights. He would often text Hannah to check if she was all right. Time passed,
and they gradually forgot the incident. Hannah continued to live normally. The nightmare seemed to have faded away. Oliver sighed with relief, telling himself he had worried too much. After graduating from middle school, Oliver never saw Hannah again because they went to different schools. He heard from friends that she was healthy and had a stable job. The photo gradually became just a faint memory, until about 2 years ago, Oliver received a message from an old classmate. Initially, he was excited because no one had contacted him for a long time, but the joy vanished after the first sentence. "Do you remember Hannah? She passed away." Oliver felt the world spinning. He was so shocked, he dropped his phone. When he asked for more details, Oliver learned that Hannah had suffered from severe depression after starting work and had been taking time off for treatment. Oliver tried to reassure himself that the old incident was just a coincidence, that it was likely due to the depression and unrelated to the photo from that day. But the next words from his friend completely shattered that thought. Her family found Hannah in her bedroom. She had ended her life by hanging herself. When cleaning her room in her only desk drawer, they found an old, faded photograph. It was the portrait of the middle-aged woman in old-fashioned attire, holding a piece of paper with the familiar chilling words, "Whoever finds this photo will hang themselves and end it all." Oliver was in extreme shock. Telling the story, he choked up, saying that the handwriting in the photo her family found was very different from the handwriting they had seen that day. Oliver didn't know if it was the same photo or a different copy, but what he couldn't understand was why Hannah kept it. Did she search for it, or did it find its way to Hannah? Oliver has always been tormented by a sense of guilt. He wakes up in the middle of the night with nightmares about Hannah, about her face in her final moments. Oliver said through tears, his voice breaking, "If I hadn't screamed that day, if I had let the photo float away silently, maybe she wouldn't have had to die." When Oliver finished telling the story, the room we were sitting in was steeped in silence. I looked at him. He's now a grown man, still carrying the inexplicable mystery of a 14-year-old child. I hope Oliver will soon escape that torment and find happiness in his life.
My name is William. I have a story from back in high school that I carry with me to this day. I remember every single detail. Whenever I think about it, I find myself questioning what was actually real. What makes it even stranger is that I'm the only one who felt like something was wrong, and I'm the only one who remembers it this way. Back when I was 14, I'll admit I was a bit of a manipulator. I wasn't a bad kid or cruel, just more calculating than the others. I always knew how to twist a situation to get exactly what I wanted. Looking back, those petty little schemes make me feel both embarrassed and a bit amused. At the start of the second semester that year, a new kid named George transferred to my school. Most people were impressed by his good looks and his polite manners, but for me, it was all about the watch on his wrist. Even from a distance, I could tell how expensive it was. Brown leather strap, gold face. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I heard rumors that George's family was loaded. Apparently, his dad moved around a lot for high-level work. Hearing that just fueled my greed. I figured since his family was so rich, a watch like that wouldn't even be missed. So I started hanging out with George, acting like the friendliest guy in the world. George seemed genuinely happy to have a friend. He was probably overwhelmed by the new school, so having someone be nice to him meant a lot. But the way he looked at me with such gratitude made me uncomfortable because I knew my friendship was a total lie. About 2 weeks later, I invited George over for a sleepover. My plan was simple: get on his good side, ask to borrow the watch, and maybe play the poor friend card so well that he'd feel guilty and just give it to me. That night, we hung out in my room, eating snacks, drinking soda, and playing video games. I kept complimenting his watch, dropping hints like, "Man, I wish I had something like that. It would be amazing to own a piece like that." I noticed George just smiled slightly and nodded, not saying much else. "Let's tell ghost stories," George suddenly suggested once we finished gaming. I wasn't really into it, but I didn't have a reason to say no. "Sure, why not?" I went first. I told some old, cliché story about a grave robber who stole a dead man's organs and got haunted for it. It was pretty lame. George listened with a totally blank expression, then he smirked. "My turn," George said. "My story is about a family that looks completely normal, but they're actually monsters." George's voice dropped. It became low, steady, and cold. He told me that this family never stayed in one place for very long. They moved from town to town, breaking into empty houses and living there for a few weeks to avoid being caught. I found myself getting sucked into the story and the way George was telling it. "The son in that family has a job," George said, staring directly into my eyes. His eyes seemed to turn dark under the dim glow of the nightlight. "He goes to the local school and finds the most gullible kid. He tricks that kid into becoming bait for his parents. He might lure the kid to his house, but the best way is to follow the kid to their house. That way, the monster family can have a massive feast with the whole family on the menu." George stopped abruptly. The room went dead silent. He just looked at me and gave me a very strange, knowing smile. Right at that moment, a massive thud came from downstairs. It sounded like the front door slamming shut. My heart nearly stopped. My parents were supposed to be asleep. George kept talking as if he hadn't heard a thing. He started describing how the monsters would break into a house in the middle of the night. Every word he said matched the sounds I was hearing in real life. I felt my entire body go stiff with terror. The floorboards creaked. I heard slow, heavy footsteps. Then, the sound of someone walking up the stairs toward my bedroom door. "George, stop! Did you hear that?" I yelled, panicking. George was silent for a second. Then he gave me that same cryptic smile. "Yeah, I heard it." I didn't wait. I bolted upright, ripped the door open, ran into the hallway, and froze. There were two strangers standing right in front of me, a man and a woman. Both were dressed in dark clothes. When I looked at their faces, they both smiled at the exact same time. It was the same smile George had. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents came running out of their room immediately, asking what was wrong. I pointed at the strangers, and my dad calmly introduced them as George's parents. Right then, George ran out of my room and hugged them. I stood there paralyzed, breathing hard. My parents were acting totally normal, but the three members of George's family were all staring at me. My dad explained that they had met at a neighborhood block party that evening and really hit it off. He said that George's house had lost power, so my parents invited the whole family to stay the night. I couldn't say a word. The gaze of George's family was locked on me. All three of them had the exact same look in their eyes. That night, I was forced to go back to my room and sleep in the same room as George. I didn't dare close my eyes. I just curled up, peeking over at the other bed. Suddenly, George sat up in the dark and held out the gold watch. "This is the first and last gift I can give you," George whispered. "You really wanted it, didn't you?" A moment later, I heard strange sounds coming from my parents' room. It sounded like fabric tearing and heavy thuds. Pure terror pushed me over the edge. I sprinted into my parents' room, screaming about man-eating monsters, begging them to call the police, and telling my dad to get his gun. My parents woke up looking incredibly annoyed. They scolded me for watching too many horror movies and insisted that George's family were lovely people. I cried and begged until they finally let me sleep on their floor. But I couldn't sleep. Every little noise made me jump, and I couldn't get George's story out of my head. Eventually, I passed out from pure exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up with a start. My parents were there, my dad was drinking coffee, and my mom was making breakfast like any other day. Everything was so normal that I wondered if the whole night had just been a long nightmare. "Where is George's family?" I asked. "They left early this morning. my dad said casually. I went back to my room and was shocked to see George's watch sitting neatly on my desk. He had kept his word. It was mine. On Monday, George didn't show up to school. Our teacher gave a brief announcement saying his family had moved away because his dad's work schedule had changed. I sat there staring at George's empty seat all day, not hearing a single word of the lesson. I felt confused, hollow, and a little bit haunted. I had almost convinced myself that I was just being paranoid about George's family until the next day. News broke that a kid in our grade had gone missing. The whole school was in a panic because there wasn't a single trace left behind. I immediately remembered what George had said. They lure prey at local schools and move constantly, never staying in one place for more than a month. I wonder if it was just a coincidence, or if George's family was hiding something truly dark. To this day, that missing kid has never been found, and I still wonder who George's family really was. I still have the watch. Even though I wanted it so badly that I came up with a whole plan to steal it, I've never felt any joy in owning it. Every time I look at that gold face, I feel a chill. I never manipulate people or scheme to get what I want anymore. Instead, I try to live with genuine kindness. I have a feeling that when you get things through trickery, you end up paying a very heavy price. My name is Dennis. After graduating from college, I stayed in New York to live and work. My hometown is in Virginia. My mother passed away when I was 16, so my dad is the only family I have left. We are very close and have never been afraid to show how much we care about each other. However, because of my busy work schedule, I only get to visit him during major holidays. The rest of the time, we stay in touch through our usual weekend phone calls. This strange story happened on a freezing night in February of last year. I had just gotten back to my apartment after a very late meeting. I was exhausted, but suddenly my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number, but I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. "Is this Dennis Parker? This is Oakwood Hospital. We need to inform you that your father, Henry Parker, is currently in the emergency room. His condition is very serious. You should get here immediately." My heart felt like it stopped beating. I went into survival mode instantly. I grabbed my coat and my keys and sped off into the night. The drive from New York to my hometown usually takes about 5 hours, but in the middle of a massive snowstorm, the road felt like it went on forever. The temperature outside had dropped to about 27 degrees. Around 2 a.m., I had already passed through Delaware and was only about 30 miles from home. Suddenly, a bizarre sensation washed over me. It wasn't just typical sleepiness. I felt a wave of intense nausea, and my chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing it. Then, my ears started ringing. A high-pitched screeching sound, like static on a broken radio, ran down my spine and made my head spin. My vision went blurry, and the snowflakes hitting the windshield looked like ghosts flying straight at my face. Just when I thought I was going to lose control of the car, I saw the lights of a Shell gas station on the side of the highway. I swerved in, parked, and stumbled into the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. In the mirror, my face was pale, and my eyes were bloodshot from the stress. When I walked to the counter to buy a bottle of water, I froze. Standing behind the register was Caleb, an old friend from high school. We used to be best friends, but we lost touch completely after we went off to college. Caleb looked a bit pale. His skin seemed grayish under the fluorescent lights, but he gave me a familiar smile. "Dennis? What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" Still out of breath, I told him about the call from Oakwood Hospital and my dad's condition. As soon as I mentioned the name of the hospital, Caleb's face went white. He looked at me with total horror, as if I had just said the craziest thing in the world. "Dennis, what are you talking about? That hospital was boarded up and abandoned 5 years ago. There was a huge gas leak and a fire that killed 2 nurses. The place is just a ruin now, nothing but rubble and barbed wire." Caleb's words felt like a bucket of ice water being dumped on me. With shaking hands, I checked my phone's call history. To my absolute shock, there was no record of an unknown number calling me at midnight. My call log only showed my usual contacts from work. I immediately called my dad. After a few rings, he answered. He sounded full of energy and a bit surprised. "Dennis, why are you calling this late?" "Dad, are you okay?" "Where are you?" "I'm at the Veterans Bowling Club. I'm doing great. It's just my wallet that's not doing so well." I could clearly hear the sound of bowling pins crashing and people laughing in the background. I felt a massive wave of relief, but I was also completely confused. I looked at Caleb. He was still standing there, nodding quietly as if he already knew the answer. I figured someone had played a cruel prank on me, or maybe I was just so overworked that I was having a mental breakdown. I got back in my car and drove all the way back to New York that same night, telling myself I'd see a therapist the next day. The next morning, my dad called me back. I told him the whole story. He was baffled and insisted that he had been fine all night. But when I got to the part about the gas station, my dad's voice suddenly dropped, and he went silent for a long time. "Dennis, listen to me. That Shell station, it's been closed and abandoned for 6 months." My heart started racing again. My dad continued. "There was a violent robbery there. Mr. Toby, the owner, and his whole family disappeared into thin air that night. The county police have been offering a reward for any info on them for half a year now." "But Dad, I saw Caleb. I talked to him." "Dennis, Caleb was Mr. Toby's son. He went missing with the rest of the family that night. No one has seen them since." I collapsed onto the floor, breaking out in a cold sweat. I opened the maps on my phone and retraced my route from the night before. I found a detail that made my skin crawl. If I hadn't stopped at that ghost gas station to see Caleb, the road I was on would have led me directly into the main gates of the abandoned Oakwood Hospital. As I searched for more news about the gas station and the hospital, I found a local report stating that the police had discovered a massive, deep hole that had been dug right in the middle of the old hospital lobby just a few days prior. If I hadn't stopped, I would have driven straight into that pit in the middle of a snowstorm with zero visibility. I looked at my watch and the date, wondering if I was dreaming or if this was real life. What was actually happening? It felt like a nightmare, but the evidence of the route and the call to my dad were undeniable. The question that haunts me to this day is, if Caleb is missing, who was playing his part to stop me from going to that abandoned hospital? Was it the spirit of an old friend protecting me from another dimension? And that phone call, was it something trying to lure me into a death trap in a ruined hospital? My name is Owen. I was 12 years old that year, and my parents took me to my grandparents' house for spring break. It was a small village right next to a forest with a name that sounded creepy, Gunner's Clough. At the time, I didn't think much of the name. I was just excited to get away from the crowded city and the mountain of homework waiting for me. The best part was that the local kids welcomed me right away. We became friends after just one afternoon of playing soccer in an empty lot near the church. During our first night hanging out, the group told me about the forest and a man who lived there all by himself. His name was Marsh. They only told me his name so I would know who he was, but none of them actually called him that. To them, he was Fishface. It was a nickname that sounded both childish and mean, but when they described his face, I understood why they used it. Everyone described Mr. Marsh the same way. He had unusually large, bulging eyes with so much white showing that he always looked like he was staring in shock. His lips were thick and sagging, and even when his mouth was closed, they didn't quite cover his teeth. The most striking thing was his flat head, as if it had been pressed thin from both sides. Mr. Marsh lived in a rickety old wooden cabin deep in the woods. Hardly anyone ever saw him during the day. The village kids treated messing with him like a game. They would throw rocks at his roof or ring the doorbell and run away. To them, it was a test of courage. No one had ever seen him chase anyone. That was exactly what made it so exciting. If he had come out screaming with a stick, the kids probably would have laughed and moved on. but the total silence from that house made everyone curious. One night, the group gathered at the edge of the woods like usual. It was early spring and still cold. The ground was damp, and the air smelled like wet, rotting leaves. Colin, the gutsiest kid in the group, always wanted to push things to the limit. After we talked for a while, Colin suddenly suggested, "Let's go all the way to his house. No more throwing rocks from far away. Let's knock on the door, prank him to his face, and run. Let's make it a night to remember." He said it as casually as if he were asking us to go buy candy. We looked at each other, and no one laughed. We stared into the pitch-black forest in front of us. The tall trees stood close together, their leaves blocking the moonlight. It was dark and terrifying inside. I didn't want to go. My heart was already thumping before we even started. But unfortunately, the whole group was excited by Colin's idea, and they all started walking into the woods. I couldn't stay behind alone. At that age, the fear of being called a coward was stronger than the fear of the dark. I told myself I would just go along for the ride and not actually do anything. After walking for about 15 minutes, the cabin appeared. It looked lonely and dead silent. Following the plan, Colin confidently stepped forward first. He picked up a rock and threw it hard onto the roof. The loud thud echoed through the quiet woods, and then everything went silent again. Jamie, the second boldest kid after Colin, stepped up. He always wanted to prove he wasn't afraid of anyone. Jamie walked right up onto the rotting wooden porch. The boards creaked loudly under his feet. Then, he raised his hand and knocked 3 times firmly on the door. The door swung open unexpectedly right after the last knock. We all jumped back a step, getting ready to run. It was pitch black inside. We couldn't see any furniture or anyone standing there. It was just a deep, dark void, like the mouth of a cave. Jamie turned back to look at us and gave a proud smile. Then, he stepped over the threshold and walked a few steps into the house. We were all stunned by what Jamie did. At first, there were some giggles and whispered jokes, but slowly, everything went quiet. No one said a word. Then, a sound came from inside. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the wooden floor. The atmosphere became incredibly tense. We all stayed perfectly silent, our eyes glued to the door. 10 minutes passed. One kid suggested we should go get an adult, but Colin told him to shut up. Then Jamie appeared at the doorway. He didn't scream, and he didn't run. He just walked out slowly. His eyes were wide and staring. His face was ghostly white, and his jaw was locked tight. "Jamie?" Colin called out softly, but Jamie didn't react at all. Colin went over and shook Jamie's shoulder, but he just stood there like a statue. One of the kids said in a voice that sounded like he was about to cry, "Run, you guys!" That flipped the panic switch for all of us. Colin had to pull Jamie along as we ran because Jamie's legs were stiff, like they had been glued to the ground. We all agreed not to tell any adults what happened. After that night, we still hung out, but Jamie wasn't there. No one brought up any more crazy ideas. Jamie never spoke another word from that night on. His family took him to see doctors, and they said it was severe psychological trauma, likely from a massive shock. No one knew exactly what he saw or what happened to him. We went to visit him and found him just sitting there, eyes wide open, rocking back and forth. I went back to the city when spring break ended. Over the next few weeks, I tried to stay in touch with the other guys. The news about Jamie didn't get any better. He was moved to a mental health facility. For a whole year, he remained silent. Sometimes he would bang his head against the wall, doing it over and over until his forehead bled. The doctors tried many different treatments, but nothing worked. A year later, Jamie passed away from a self-inflicted head injury. I was in total shock when I heard the news. I haven't had the heart to go back to that village since then. I still talk to a few of the guys occasionally, but no one ever mentions Mr. Marsh anymore. I still wonder if Mr. Marsh was even real, or if he was just a legend we built up. Did he really have a face like a fish? And I always think about that dragging sound from that night. What was it? What could possibly take away a boy's ability to speak in just a few minutes? Perhaps the real secret went with Jamie forever, leaving the rest of us with a silence that never quite goes away. My name is Lily. I'm 29 years old now, working at a law firm downtown. 12 years have passed since that summer night in 2014, but whenever a random number pops up on my phone screen, my finger still freezes for a second. In the summer of 2014, I was 17. We had just finished our high school entrance exams, and the pressure was finally off before starting 10th grade. To celebrate, my parents let me host a slumber party at my house. At first, the guest list was pretty long, but since it was an overnight thing, a lot of parents were strict and said no. In the end, it was just the three of us, me, Ava, and Brooke. Around 6 that evening, Ava texted saying she was grabbing some snacks and would be over early. Brooke said she had to double-check with her mom and would let us know. I was so excited. I set out all the pillows and rented a bunch of horror movies from the shop down the street. I kept blowing up the group chat with updates, but only Ava was replying. Brooke was totally silent. By 7 p.m., I ran out of patience. I called Brooke's cell phone, but it just rang and rang until it hit voicemail. I figured her phone died, or maybe her mom took it away. Then I remembered that Brooke had written her family's landline number in my yearbook. Back in 2014, home phones were still pretty common. I flipped through the pages and punched in the number as fast as I could. After 3 rings, someone picked up. The man's voice was deep and sounded tired. I assumed it was Brooke's dad, so I politely asked if she was home. He just gave a short, "Yeah," and said he'd go get her. I heard him set the phone down on a table, followed by his footsteps fading away across a hardwood floor. Then I heard a strange dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. After about a minute, a girl's voice came on the line. "Hello? Hey, it's Lily. I couldn't get through to your cell, so I called the house. What's the word? Is your mom letting you come over?" There was total silence. It was a heavy, thick silence, so quiet I could hear the static on the line. Her voice was trembling. She sounded weak and raspy, like she had been crying for a long time. "Are you okay? You sound really weird." "Lily, my dad, he's standing right next to me," she whispered. Her breathing was fast and shallow. I froze. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Suddenly, without any warning, her voice changed completely. It became loud, clear, and almost too cheerful. "Oh, sorry. I actually can't make it tonight. Have fun, though." Then she hung up. The dial tone left me sitting there in shock. I felt like I had seen a ghost. I remembered Brooke's voice differently. I thought maybe she was sick and her parents were grounding her and she was just upset. I felt disappointed, but I tried to brush it off. I called Ava to tell her Brooke wasn't coming, but Ava sounded confused. She told me Brooke had just texted her saying her mom gave her the green light to come over. I immediately called Brooke's cell again. This time, she picked up on the first ring. Her voice was the one I knew, full of energy and totally normal. "Why do you keep calling me?" Brooke laughed. "I just called your house. You said you couldn't come." Brooke laughed even harder. "Lily, are you crazy? My dad has been on a business trip in California since Monday. It's just me and my mom. Besides, we got rid of our landline last year. That phone has been broken forever." My heart dropped. I opened my call history and looked at the digits one by one. It turned out that in my rush, I had mistyped the very last digit. I hadn't called Brooke's house at all. I had called a complete stranger. But the terrifying part wasn't the wrong number. It was that the man and the girl on the other end acted like they actually knew me and Brooke. Maybe the girl's name was Brooke too. Later that night, once Ava and Brooke were both at my house, I told them everything. My cozy living room suddenly felt cold. Ava, who was always the curious one, had an idea that I wish I had turned down. "Call it back. Put it on speaker. I want to know what's going on." In the dark room, with only the dim light of the TV flickering, I dialed the number again. I hit the speaker button. The ringing felt like it lasted forever in the quiet house. On the 7th ring, someone picked up. No one said hello. There was only breathing. It was heavy, wet, and slow, like the person had their mouth right against the receiver. We all huddled together, holding our breath. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the phone. We all jumped. The scream was long and ear-piercingly loud. We scrambled away from the phone, terrified. The screaming continued, sounding like someone was in unimaginable pain. Then, the line went dead. The sudden silence made the air feel impossible to breathe. Call the police," Brooke whispered, her face as white as a sheet. "But tell them what?" Ava argued, her voice shaking. "We called the wrong number. They'll just think it's a prank call. We don't even know where that house is." In the end, our fear of getting in trouble won. We decided not to tell any adults, and we never dared to call that number again. We tried to go back to our party, turning the music up loud and eating junk food, but our eyes kept darting back to the phone sitting on the table. Now, at 29, I still check every phone number at least 3 times before I hit dial. I still wonder about that girl. Was her name really Brooke? Or did that man force her to pretend to be my friend the moment he heard me say the name Brooke at the start of the call? I'm afraid that on the night I dialed the wrong number, I didn't just make a mistake. I think I accidentally listened in on a nightmare happening in the dark.
It's been a few years, but I still can't forget what I saw on the security camera that morning. The image of the back door of the gas station slowly opening, but no one walking out. I'm Megan, 32 years old. I work the morning shift at an old gas station in a small town in Montana. It's pretty remote, with just a few gas pumps, a small convenience store, and a gravel parking lot in the back. I would arrive at 6 a.m. to take over for the night shift employee, a woman named Dora. The stillness of this place, especially before the sun was fully up, always made me feel a little uneasy. It was a morning in autumn. I arrived at the gas station about 10 minutes earlier than usual. When I walked into the convenience store, a middle-aged man was standing at the counter, his hands in his pockets, looking a little grumpy. The counter was empty. I guess this customer had been waiting for a while and was getting annoyed. "Dora?" I called out loudly, but there was no answer. I quickly apologized to the man and checked him out. After the man left, I looked around the store. The counter was as neat as usual. The cash register was locked, and the shelves were not disturbed. I went to the back stockroom and called out a few more times. I checked the bathroom, but there was no sign of Dora. On the break room table, I saw her phone. I wondered if she had an emergency and left without having time to let me know. I ran outside and looked at the parking lot. Dora's car was still parked near the back. A feeling of confusion started to rise in me. Dora always followed work procedures. No matter what, she would always inform me and the boss about the situation. I called my boss and briefly told him everything. My boss told me to check the security camera and call the police if necessary. I opened the computer at the counter and logged into the CCTV system. The station had 3 cameras, one at the counter, one at the gas pumps, and one in the back parking lot. My hands trembled a little as I rewound the footage from 4 a.m. when Dora was still at the counter. The video began with Dora standing behind the counter, occasionally glancing at the clock on the wall. She looked normal, maybe just a little tired from the long night shift. Then suddenly, she looked up, her eyes directed toward the back door, as if she had just heard something. After a few seconds of listening, Dora quickly stepped away from the counter and went straight toward the back door. I immediately switched to the parking lot camera, not understanding why I felt so tense. The screen showed the door slowly opening, the hinges creaking softly, but there was no Dora, no one there at all. I rewound it in slow motion, my eyes glued to the screen, watching every second. The door opened, the air seemed to stand still, then the door closed. I still didn't see her. "No way! What is this?" I mumbled to myself. I checked the time again, making sure the 2 cameras were perfectly synchronized. The camera wasn't broken. Everything else on the screen looked completely normal. Dora's car, the trash can behind the store, but Dora seemed to have vanished into the darkness. A feeling of fear washed over me, making my hands and feet go cold. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe she had stayed close to the wall, avoiding the camera's angle, and then ran straight into the pine forest behind. But why would she do that? Did someone call her out? Or was someone waiting, threatening her? These thoughts made me shiver and look around the store. Suddenly I felt scared of this familiar place. I called the police. While waiting, I went out to the parking lot and stood right at the back door, observing everything. The ground was covered with gravel and dry leaves. The dense pine forest was about 50 yards away. I imagined Dora running in there. But for what reason? Where did she go? The police arrived. They thoroughly checked the store, the parking lot, and rewatched the video. An officer took careful notes and asked me about Dora. I told him what I knew. Dora was 28, lived alone in a small apartment near downtown Livingston, and had been working the night shift for 2 years. The officer asked if Dora had any enemies, or if there was anyone suspicious in the area. I was stunned for a few seconds. I said I didn't know. Dora and I weren't close enough to know too much about each other. The police checked Dora's car. The door was unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition. A cup of cold coffee was on the passenger seat, next to a neatly folded sweater. There were no signs of a struggle or an attack. The police called a search team, but the forest was too vast, and the autumn wind had caused a thick layer of fallen leaves, covering any possible traces. Dora's apartment was also searched, but there was nothing unusual. No clues were found. In the following weeks, the story of Dora's disappearance spread throughout the town. The local newspaper published a short article asking for information from the public. A few people said they had seen Dora, but the information they provided was not helpful. 3 years have passed, and Dora is still missing without a trace. I still work at the gas station, but every time I open the back door to take out the trash, I always feel a strange cold draft. I don't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but I can't understand how Dora disappeared. Was she afraid of something in the forest? Or was someone really waiting in the darkness where the camera couldn't record? I always want to believe that Dora simply quit her job and is living peacefully somewhere far away. But then, every time the back door creaks open in the wind, I find myself involuntarily turning my head, half hoping, half afraid, that Dora will walk in. My name is Anna. This story happened 8 years ago, when I was 15, living in Los Angeles, California. I often babysat to earn extra money. I lived near a pretty wealthy area where people were usually generous with their pay. There was never a shortage of babysitting jobs, so I made a decent amount of money. I've had to watch some pretty strange kids, but the case I'm about to tell you is truly the most special one. It was the Barnes family. They had a 9-year-old son named Michael. His parents were busy with work, so they didn't have much time for him. Instead, they gave the babysitter a long list of requirements and a very generous payment in return. They told me that Michael was a smart kid, but sometimes a little different and needed a little more special attention. From the moment I met Michael, he seemed very quiet. The Barnes' house was spacious with many bedrooms, a large living room, a kitchen, and a playroom specifically for Michael. The house was modern and neat, giving it both a cozy and comfortable feel. I was going to sleep there for one night. I was given a room near Michael's playroom. The playroom had a big toy closet. It was big enough for a Lego table with tons of pieces and other toys. Michael would spend most of his time in that area, building Legos and playing alone, but I would often hear him talking as if someone else was in there with him. I guess this might be the issue his parents mentioned. Michael would only leave the closet to eat and then go right back in. He didn't come out until I told him it was time for bed. In the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from the closet, like Lego pieces clattering together. I sat up, turned on my nightlight, and called out to Michael. Immediately, the noise stopped. I got out of bed, deciding I would go to the playroom next door and see what was going on. When I turned on the playroom light, no one was there. The light inside the closet that Michael played in wasn't on, so I was confused. Michael couldn't possibly be playing in the dark. I went and opened the closet and turned on the light, but Michael wasn't in there. I didn't see anyone, so I went back to my room and went back to sleep. A while later, I woke up again. It was probably because I wasn't used to the place. There was light coming into my room from outside. I was sure Michael was in the playroom. I called out to Michael again. I was a little annoyed. I thought he was trying to get away with not sleeping and sneaking back into the playroom. I went into that room again and saw the shadow of a pair of feet at the bottom of the closet door. Then I heard a little giggle, as if Michael was teasing me. I knew for sure he was in there. I walked over and threw the door open, but it was truly terrifying when no one was in there. The spot where the shadow of the feet was now completely empty. I ran to Michael's room in a panic. I saw the boy was sound asleep in his bed. I locked the door, then lay down on the floor next to him. I just wanted to feel a sense of security with someone else there. The next day, when Michael's parents came home, I decided to keep quiet about what I had seen. I was sure about what I saw, but I was also sure that no one would believe what I had to say. I know there are a lot of strange and unexplainable stories. I've read them online and heard people tell them, but I would usually laugh at them. Until that day, I was the one who witnessed it. I took the payment, felt relieved, and left. I told myself I would never babysit for that family again. Even though I had left, whenever I think about it, the images, sounds, and chaotic feelings of that night still send shivers down my spine. I don't know what to believe, but I do know that the fear I felt has stayed with me longer than the money I received.
My name is Andrew. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. My father was a police detective, a serious, quiet man with sharp, cold eyes. Growing up, the person I loved and felt closest to wasn't my father. It was my Uncle Caleb. To my young eyes, Uncle Caleb was the coolest guy in the world. He was my father's younger brother, but he was the total opposite of a stern detective. He ran a surf shop at Santa Monica Beach. He had shoulder-length hair, always wore sunglasses, and laughed loudly like life was just one big game. He lived in a small blue house by the ocean with his girlfriend, Lena. She was tall, tan, and had hair as red as fire. Every summer, my family would drive down to hang out with them. Uncle Caleb taught me to surf, while Lena built sandcastles with me and my little brother. Those were the happiest days of my childhood. One summer, when I was 7, everything changed. We were all packed and ready to go to Uncle Caleb's. I was so excited about my new swimsuit and the fact that I'd grown a few inches. Suddenly, my dad announced that Uncle Caleb was busy and the trip was canceled. I was heartbroken and cried for hours. Dad comforted me by promising we would go the following week. But that trip never happened. I remember my parents acting very strange after that. They whispered to each other with serious faces. My mom cried a lot at night. I could hear her sobbing from their bedroom. My father became even colder and more distant. The next day, my parents sat my brother and me down. Dad told us Uncle Caleb had died in a car accident. Mom added that he had gone to heaven. I just sat there in silence. I was only 7, too young to really understand death, but I knew one thing for sure. He was never coming back. There would be no more summers at the blue house by the beach. I cried a lot. But eventually, a huge void opened up in my life, and I didn't know what to do with it. As time passed, the wound was buried. I grew up, went to college, got a job, and fell in love. But in the dusty corners of my memory, Uncle Caleb was always there. A piece of my childhood that had been snapped off and never mended. When I was 27, living with my girlfriend Emily in Oxnard, we happened to be driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, PCH, towards Santa Monica to visit my parents. As we passed a steep cliffside, Emily pointed out the window. "I just remembered something," she said softly. "About 20 years ago, A friend of my mom's went on vacation with her boyfriend to a cabin somewhere near here, and they vanished. A few days later, the police found the boyfriend's car at the bottom of a cliff. I kept driving and listening, not realizing where this was going yet. The boyfriend died inside from a broken neck. But Lena, they found her in the trunk. Her body had been dismembered and wrapped in bags. When I heard the name Lena, I slammed on the brakes. Emily gasped and grabbed my arm. "What's wrong with you?" What was the boyfriend's name? My voice was trembling. I think it was Caleb. I couldn't say another word, even though Emily kept asking what was wrong. My mind went blank, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. I called my father that night. He wouldn't explain over the phone and told me to come over the next day. When I arrived, my mother was in tears. She apologized for hiding the truth for so long to protect me. "You were so small," she sobbed. "We didn't know how to tell you." My father sat down next to me. He told me that on that fateful day, Uncle Caleb had called him from the road. "Your uncle was delirious," Dad said. "He was screaming nonsense." My father was actually the one assigned to investigate the case back then. He was at the scene. He was the one who saw Lena's body in the trunk, and he saw his own brother dead in the driver's seat with a broken neck and a bloody face. As he told me the story, my father mentioned details that confused the entire investigative team. Nobody could understand what actually happened. That weekend, even though the camping area was usually packed, every single cabin surrounding the one where Caleb and Lena stayed was empty. There were no witnesses. No one heard a scream, and no one saw anything unusual. Just a few hours before that delirious phone call, a gas station attendant saw them acting completely normal. Caleb pumped gas while Lena bought a soda. They were laughing and kissing before getting back in the car. The attendant said they looked very happy. But in the 20 minutes that followed, Uncle Caleb murdered Lena, dismembered her, put her in the trunk, and then intentionally drove off a cliff without his seatbelt on. Caleb didn't do drugs, he didn't drink, and he had no history of mental illness. The toxicology report showed nothing in his system, my father said. He went silent for a long time, then looked me straight in the eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. "Son, I've been a cop for over 30 years. I've investigated and analyzed so many criminals. But I will never, ever understand why my kind, gentle brother went insane and committed such a horrific crime. 20 years have passed, but that question still has no answer. What happened in those 20 short minutes? What did Uncle Caleb see or hear? What could turn a man that gentle into a brutal killer? My family will never know, and that will always be a dull, aching pain that never goes away."
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.
you.